running mate, to my rather competitor who is not here, and to the others. I would also like to take the earliest opportunity to pass my condolences to the people who are involved in the Nithi Bridge accident. We have lost a lot of Kenyans as I stand here to talk about the future. But let me end with the few seconds remaining, and because I'm alone, I hope I will be extended a few seconds, to say that I am here as an anti-corruption crusader. I am here as a friend of the people of Kenya and the people of the universe. I am here as a person, a man of peace. We are at a very defining moment in Kenya. For me, the elections of 9th August are very defining. 59 years after independence, we still have to discuss, we still have to find out what we need to do with this nation going into the future. Because the question begs answers. Why is it that 59 years after independence, Kenyans cannot afford not even a single meal per day? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high cost of living than we have had before? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high level of unemployment? And why, 59 years after independence, are we so indebted than we've never done before? And yet, those we were born together with, those we obtained independence with us, a number of them, and many of them have gone on ahead. And right now, they are first worlds, they are even competing with greater nations.
Mr. Wahiga, thank you. Your 2 minutes was up, and we did accord you a few more seconds since you are alone. Why, Mr. Wahiga, does a man of the cloth, a man of God, want to get deeper into politics here in Kenya and be the president of this nation?
You know, leadership is part of what, if I go spiritual, God created. And in my faith, the Christian faith, we say all leadership comes from God. And He gives men and women here on earth the determination, the wherewithal to choose who He may lead. But I'm not just a man of cloth. I'm a lawyer by profession and a senior lawyer, senior counsel by virtue of years, with that 9 years to my belt. Not only that, like I have said, I am a person who has lived and watched in this nation, read the history of this nation, read the histories of other nations. And I am here because also the Constitution allows me. I fit the bill to come and run for presidency. But I come again as a new person in this area. This is my second stab at the president, but I have not been there before. But I'm here because I believe the elections of 9th August require a new person, a new bloom, a clean person. We need to change if this nation will go forward. That's why I come in as a man of cloth as well.
Mr. Wahiga, the reasons you give tonight, basically every Kenyan would give them. What is unique in your proposition?
Why should that be my position? I am tired, like Kenyans are. I am disappointed by the leadership we've had so far. I am also one of those Kenyans who've sat back and watched at the leadership that again wants to come back. A lot of us out there and Kenyans are saying, why do we have to recycle them? I'll tell you what leadership is all about. And because I'm a man of the cloth as well, and the cloth reflects who I am. I'm a little disappointed, and doubly disappointed that my competitor couldn't come in. If he would have come in, he would have come in a durag, because that represents who he is. This represents my inner me. But leadership, if you have occasion to look, and we read books here, the scripture, the man, one of the people I follow much, is one who was known as King David. And it says, when he was the president, the prime minister of the nation of Israel, it's written of him that he shepherded that nation according to integrity of heart and skillfulness of his hands. Leadership is about taking care, providing, making a way. And that's why, as a man of cloth, as a lawyer, and for the first time we have a lawyer as a presidential candidate, it is so defining that a person like me, because if a man of cloth would follow the ways of the scripture and the ways of our constitution, if we would follow the ways that are right and accepted international standards. He would not steal from his people. We would not have the level of scandals we've had in this nation, which I'll talk in a moment. We will not have our development funds, public funds stashed abroad. And this is why we are here. Poor 59 years. Yeah. But nations that we got independence with, and I can just mention two, Singapore, South Korea, smaller nations than ourselves, nations with people who are equally gifted like Kenyans are gifted. We are nowhere near catching up with them. I am here because I believe we've got what it takes as Kenyans. We can do it, and we have a reason after 9th to do it and move forward.
Mr. Wahiga, the church does play a crucial role in national development and in securing our nation in many ways and in bringing guidance to the people. But many would argue that in many ways the church has failed us. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't agree with them. I wouldn't agree with them. To the contrary, my thinking is that the church has not been fully involved in governance, separate but yet a very important partner. Talking about the liberations we've had in this nation from 1963, the fight for independence, talking about the first liberation, the second, the Constitution review, the church was very key. Religious organizations are important. Faith is an integral part of mankind, and every person, it doesn't matter who it is, believes in something, follows something, and refers to something when the time comes, when push comes, when pull comes to push. But you would have to be specific, because I know the church has been speaking out. We've had Bishop Sokulu, we had Muge, we have Joya still with us, gallant men of this nation. And I can say we are here because of that. Probably what you are referring to is you expect more. This time you have one of them, but also a professional in his own right.
The voices you have mentioned are voices of yesteryears. I'm yet to hear you mention the current voices speaking, because your voice has been silent on this. We haven't heard you condemn what's going on in the country. We haven't seen you come out loud. And specific example, when politicians infiltrate the church and stand at the podium and speak about politics, we have never heard you condemn this.
Well, you know, there are many ways to engage, and I've engaged in my area. Standing for me here is a journey of about 22 years. This is a starting that started from the year 2000. And this is not even my first time to express an interest in leading this nation. This is my 6th stab at an election. And in all that, it's been an expression of the fact that I have been unhappy. I have been unhappy. As a party leader, we have had occasion. We may not probably have been as loud, or if you wish, you may not have covered us. And I'm not referring to you particularly, Ken. But we have spoken out on matters. It's not the first time that I'm speaking against corruption. And you know, there is a greater way of expressing opposition. By your example, by who you were. As I stand here, I know nobody can accuse me of having been involved in any of these scandals. As I stand here, I'm a witness. I am an example of the fact that any Kenyan can run for presidency. As I stand here, I am here to break this sort of wall where we believed only a certain person and peoples. The Catholic Church has been issuing statements. NCCK has done that. Evangelical Alliance. The Muslims have been speaking. Probably it's only that they haven't been covered as much.
You yourself say that this is your 6th stab at an election. You have been unsuccessful in the past, for example, when you ran for governor of Lamu in 2013. So what's different now? What makes you think you will win this race?
There is nothing in life like not giving up. And the trouble we can be in Kenya is if we give up as we go forward to the 9th. One of the persons I followed much is Abraham Lincoln. And if I remember my history right, it was during his 13th attempt, though before that he had won some legislative position, that he became the President of the United States. And when he did that, we know that he's the one who brought about the slavery emancipation, something to date that speaks to this world about the fact that all men and women are created equal. And that's why we can speak tonight as we are here. I am an example of a person who does not give up. I have not lost in every election, I can tell you. Like the last one of 2017, I would tell you that's an election where I believe I was rigged out. It's only that I couldn't get the facts, and I had done my bit. That was the election, if you remember, where one of my competitors said that people were voted through the computer. I was going to be the senator of Lamu County. But here I am. You must live to fight another day. I am here because there is no room for giving up. The trouble in Kenya, we are where we are because we've given up. Right now, as I speak to you, and I thank you for this opportunity, Media Council, there are Kenyans who have said, tutapiga kura tu yeyote, fatalistic attitude. But thank you for the opportunity to tell Kenyans that, no, there is still another one. We don't have to recycle. There's change this time.
Maybe because you've not gotten the opportunity, that's why you can stand tall and say you have not been involved in any corruption, perhaps if you had an opportunity. But away from that, as an advocate, would you advocate for the division, complete division between the state and religion?
First, on your first question, it's not that I have not had an opportunity, I have not been appointed at the top. No, I have had occasions where I have led, but also in my private life. You see, it fights from the lowest unit as a lawyer. I can stand here and say, I have not been accused. I have not stolen clients' money. It's not just here. I've had these positions of responsibility. I've sat on the Council of the Law Society. I've sat in several corporate and non-government and religious boards. But so it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that I'm in. But coming to your question, would I advocate? I think it's important that state and region be separated. And by that, I think we need to define what that means. Because basically, it's saying that every person in a state should be allowed to exercise their faith without the government imposing on them who it is, what faith they should follow. And that's where the whole principle about state and religion comes from. But also, religious organizations have a very important part to play in the nation. They teach about better ways of living, morals. They bring governments to book. They call out when things are not going right. I do not know of any religion that condones corruption, stealing from the poor, taking money from the sick. You know, I do not know of any religion that talks about fighting, hating your neighbor. I know every religion advocates for the golden rule. Love your neighbor, peace. And they are an important component. And in a Ghana government, in a Waure-Wajakhoya government, religious leaders will play a very pivotal role. To the extent I believe, in my government, they'll even sit in cabinet. In my government, when they perform civic duties, which they do, they should even be remunerated because they are helping the government. They are rendering a service.
Mr. Waure, the question is, would you want this taken out of the Constitution completely? 32 guarantees this. You're talking to us what exists in the Constitution. What is your view? Would you want it taken off completely, or you still want it to be under the control of the state?
Come again. You need to repeat that question. Let me get you right, Ken.
The question is, what you're telling us tonight is what is entrenched in the Constitution.
Right. My
question is, as an advocate, would you want 32(1) to be expunged completely so that it's not guaranteed in the Constitution?
No, not at all, not at all. The freedom of worship and the separateness of the state and government, those are key. Standing here as a man of color, I'm probably speaking to a person who thinks, now my faith has no place in future. But standing here in who I am inside is a representation of the fact that I'll take care of everybody. Because my faith says, treat all people equal. Become a person of peace. Share equally. Defend the voiceless. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And exercise not just equality, but equity for all. That is true religion. And for my faith, the Christian faith, that's what it stands for.
Mr. Wahiga, more often than not, we see on television the church being used by politicians, the pulpit being used by politicians for them to play politics. What is your view on this? How are you going to ensure that stops?
It's not all churches that do that. First of all, a number of churches have different requirements and order of how they do things. And some of them permit, some do not. It's also important to recognize that in our society and many societies, church is a place where people meet, is a place that brings people together. I think what's important is to define what can be said within a church context building, a church building context, because the church is a place of worship. And it should not be a place where people should come and attack others, hurl abuses at others. No, that's not true religion. It's not a place where people should come and speak ill of another tribe. It's not a place even where people should come in and condone the sort of things that have made our nation be what it is those many years that I've mentioned. So I would say I don't see a problem either way. The only way, it should be tempered. It should be able to pass the same message for which a church sanctuary or any other faiths exists.
But you haven't quite answered the question. What is it that you will do to ensure that those tempers are brought down and dirty politics are not played in church?
I think speaking from here, I would only urge fellow spiritual leaders and religious leaders to, right now we are calling for peace, and I've been calling for that in my campaign. I've been speaking out and reminding Kenyans that we have a life after 9th. We have a nation. Our nation is not completely down and under. There is hope for this nation. And I would just urge them, as the CEO of this nation, I don't think I can order them, nor can I register it as to how they should conduct themselves. But I know our religious leaders of all faiths, and even church leaders who I'm closer to, they know what they should do, and they are listening to us.
Okay.
They are listening to us.
We'll now move to the topic of leadership and integrity. Apart from the professional, your record in the professional service, that's the Law Society of Kenya, and what you have done to the community, you don't have an apparent record of public service. What do you bring to the table to Kenyans, to table and tell them, because of this and that, I stand here tall and I can ask you to give me your vote?
Public service, I don't have a record. I think what you're saying is that I've not been elected or appointed into a position. Yes, there can only probably be one appointment into any given position. I have indicated the number of years that I've been in the legal profession. That's a position of responsibility. I have been involved, I have led a party for the last 16 years. That is a story of success in Kenya. A story of success, a party that has fielded people, a party that has stood up for what it was registered and formed for. Not only that, I have led, as far as I can remember, high school, I was in leadership positions. I have sat in both corporate and other boards where I have given leadership decisions. In all my life, I've found myself being moved to leadership positions, except the one that I'm looking for. But you know what? There is always a time for one to start. There is always an Obama moment and a Madeira moment for a person. I believe this for me is an Obama, is a Madeira, not just for me, but for Kenyans. But if you allow me to turn out your question, Ken.
Yes.
I am not sure I would have wanted to have some experience that I see with some of the leadership that will stand here or has stood here. I wouldn't want that experience. What experience are we talking about of? Running our country down, scandals, corruption, named in every other scandal, and yet they want to be a president. They have named in everything that has brought our nation to its knees, which it is now. If it's not them, it's their relatives, it's people close to them. For me, that is not experience. If that's part of the experience you probably are referring to, I'm so grateful tonight that I'm not part of it. But I can assure you, if I had gotten in that position, I would have been the same person that you're looking at tonight.
apart from telling Kenyans what you bring to the table, being tried and tested, Mr. Wahiga, is a very big issue in this country. I want you to look at your opponents who are not there tonight and tell Kenyans why you, why not Kenya Kwanza, why not Azimio, and why not Roots, in terms of integrity.
Kenyans, as I said at the beginning, we are at a defining moment. The elections of 9th August are pretty defining for the reasons I said before. High cost of living that we have never had before, high cost of food prices, such high unemployment as we've never had before, such high debt, foreign debt, not to mention the internal debt that we have. A lot of we had them in 2013. We had them in 1997, in 2007. And the question that you Kenyans, you must be asking, like I'm asking, what is the difference now? I even want to go further and say, even for those who it is said they might have decided, looking at the four of us, who can you say has made a difference in your life this far? If so, why are we where we are? Why do we still have money that should have been used in developing our country, stashed in nations abroad, illegally obtained and legally stashed? These are public resources. I'm not talking about personal private money. Why are we here at a time like this? And the Auditor General 4 years back tells us 215 billion Kenya shillings from Eurobond cannot be accounted for. It cannot be traced. It is a mystery. Why are we here before? And the Auditor General Nancy tells us this year that 70 billion Kenya shillings alone has not been used. Why are we here in a year like this when we have that much foreign loan? The Auditor General tells us about 540 billion Kenya shillings is in an accounted expenditure. And yet, this was a government that was supposed to change things. We had hope, but it didn't turn so. I believe the only thing that will move us forward is complete change from the top to the bottom. And what is permanent is only change, as they say. Recycling them will not take us anywhere. That's why this is a very defining election.
But you haven't told us why not those candidates. What, for example, would you want to say about these candidates?
Well, come again.
What would you want to say about these candidates, the other candidates who you're running against for president?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would like to say they have been there before. One of them has been a deputy president and is still a deputy president of this republic. He is in government. The things he is saying he can do are things he could have done these last 10 years, this last 20, this last 30, because he's in government that long, and he has not done so. The other one has been a former prime minister. He's been in a coalition, a co-president, if you wish, sharing the government 50-50. The things he is promising are things he could have done, but he has not done. He's been in this race for the last 40 years. And the other one has been in government also. He's been with the police force, he's been in the intelligentsia, and even right now, I believe he is still in there. And the thing I'm saying is, if you take even these last 10 years, let me just take these last 10 years, where we have a deputy president who wants to run for presidency. This year, my team and I have counted these last 10 years, not less than 22 scandals that have taken place in broad daylight. And those are the ones that have been reported. There are others, we are told, are secret agreements about contracts to make roads that we don't know what they say. If you go to the former coalition government, where we had, one of my competitors One of my competitors has been a co-president, a prime minister. We have counted about 12 scandals, and they have been there. They were even there in the Moi regime. And the final one, you've worked in government, you've traveled across the world, you must know something about our funds which are stashed abroad there. You are in the intelligentsia, you have served, you never retire from that. They don't fit the bill. They are not helping Kenyans.
Okay.
They are not taking what the issues are.
All right, let's turn to our next topic for discussion tonight, and that is the state of the economy. Now, you are on record, Mr. Wahiga, saying that within the first 100 days of assuming office, you will bring down the cost of living for Kenyans. How exactly do you intend to do that, and by how much?
You know, this is a serious matter, and I have not just said. In Kenya, we're facing problems at two levels. There's what you refer to similarity. There's what I consider as a short term, and there is a long term. Up until we called for the reduction, for the reintroduction of the foods, of the unga subsidy, unga was retailing going on to about 250. It was after we had announced in our manifesto that we will bring that. Thankfully, it's been brought down. But that's not all. And I'm glad that we are leading and others are following. We still know that the price of cooking oil is very high. I think now it's about 400. Bread has not come down, retailing 90, 100. Fuel is still at high prices. And those are immediate things. We don't need to wait to restructure our loan, or we don't want to wait, because those are some of the solutions I have had, to plant a kind of plant, probably, and wait for it to be harvested. We don't have to wait, because Kenyans are hungry. They need immediate results. And what I have done, and you'll find that in my manifesto, we sat down with my team of experts and thought, what is the immediate? And our proposals have come in threesome. There was unga, which has been done. Thank you very much. We thank His Excellency, the President. But in the same measure, we say also other things could have come down. But we have said we shall introduce subsidies into other food products. That's number one. Number two, we have also said that we are going to reduce pay by 50% so that Kenyans can have money they can take home with. And that is something that will benefit about 16, 17 million Kenya shillings. If you are earning about 25,000, you'll be able to take an extra 1,000. If you are earning about 35, 40, that's another 4,000. We have also come and said to spur growth, throw some money into the economy. We shall waive away tax penalties that are accrued after the day we are sworn.
All right,
and we are looking for ways to put some money in the pocket of Kenyans, something to spur, something to enable them put food on the table. Because as a country, I'm talking to you while we are broke. We are broke as a country. The most we can do is continue borrowing. I'm looking for solutions from within.
All right,
what can we do now?
And you have said that you would reduce pay by 50%, but pay accounts for 25% of Kenya's tax revenue. How then would you meet revenue targets?
You know that is not. It's not a problem. And I was going to say that's not the only problem there is in Kenya. If I take away 50%, the amount of pay we get is 460 billion. 460 billion. So 50% will be 230. When I take that money and I put into the pockets of working Kenyans, I tell you as I stand here, it will perform wonders. Kenyans are looking for any extra shilling that they can get. But how do I bridge that gap? We have tried to work around and see what can we do. And those are short-term measures because Kenyans have to survive. Otherwise, they will die, We pay the taxes, the foreign loan we pay is at 1.3 billion. And we have sat down and said, if we can persuade our friends, and Kenya has many friends, I'm glad they are represented even here by the foreign embassies and diplomats who are here, and tell them, why don't you just accept a repayment of 1 trillion instead of 1.3? That will bring about 300 billion we can bring back to bridge in the gap, And we are positive that it will be able to do that. But also the 260 billion, that we put into Kenyans' pockets. Kenyans are industrious. Kenyans have goodwill from within. Kenyans are hardworking. And this is a nation that can get money, has had money, and will get money under a new government. The 260 billion, we see it bringing returns because it will go in people starting small businesses. People will be able to start their kiosks or do something else or start what we call side hustles. What Kenyans need is just a little money and they can be able to move forward. The other thing we have thought about is spread the tax base. That's something we are looking into immediately now in office. But I need to talk to you about corruption and the money that's stashed abroad.
We're coming to that.
Yeah, we go to that. But before we talk about that, you're running for president, and you understand also as an advocate of the High Court,
right,
that for you to change some of these regulations, you will need Parliament. You give a time frame of about 100 days. Is it possible that you can get these legislations through Parliament in the period you're giving us? Or they're interim and just campaign rhetorics that you're using?
To bring food subsidies to zero rate of foods and all that, I will not need Parliament.
No, for example, changing the pay as you earn, cutting it by 50%.
I'll let for that. I'll tell you what.
Yes.
The parliamentarians who are coming in, the MCAs, understand the problems I'm talking about. They too are tired. I see goodwill will come forth. I am talking about something that every Kenyan would want to see happen. 59 years after independence, we can't continue being a nation of begging, family bowls being held up like we have seen this year. We should be self-sufficient in terms of food, water. I mean, people should not go without medicine. That's what I'm talking about. So, I mean, you know what, Ken? There is no shortcut. There is no shortcut. Because I've looked at the manifestos of my other friends, my other competitors, I'm even the one coming with something close to realism, something close to practical. And I believe we'll find ways where I have to use executive orders, which exist, which are there in our constitution. I will apply them. We are in an emergency. We are in a time of war. This time calls for leadership.
In your view, what is the biggest challenge to our economy? Is it we don't manufacture enough, we don't trade enough, or is it regulations?
It's neither of those. Those could be the others. It's because we steal, we cut away, we siphon money that is supposed to go into our manufacturing, money that's supposed to go into our agriculture. That's what we have specialized in the last 10 years. Money that is supposed to go into our skill building, money that is supposed to go into the health of our fellow Kenyans, and a healthy person is a productive person. That's what we do. This is a nation where Kenyans work hard, Kenyans labor, Kenyans have got quite a measure of work ethics, but they don't get reward for their labor. For instance, to date, we don't have explanations as what we did with the Euroboat loans. When you listen to me, and you listen to others who have spoken out there, they say even for the SGR, the amount we are repaying is not the money we use for that. I am here, and I am borne evidence by a former minister, and allow me to mention the Honorable Joseph Nyaga, God rest his soul in eternal peace. That was in 2020 when he said it's time for us to bring our money back to develop our country. He was an angry person. He had served in the government for about 40 years. He was tired. Our money that is supposed to develop this country, move us forward, is hanging out there in nations that are willing to bring it back if only there's goodwill from my end. I am bringing goodwill. I'm saying, Kenyans, we must change. Those brothers and sisters who went ahead of us did not have two brains, Ken. They did not two heads. They don't even have a landmass. They don't have what we have, but they are great brothers and sisters. We can do it. It's time now, Kenyans, to go to where we went wrong and find out why and do it clean, have a clean start.
Two things. One, what you're saying has nothing to do with growing the economy. What you're saying is the generalities. What I want to know, the role of manufacturing in growing the economy, the role of trade, and the role of regulations. And while you answer that, perhaps tell us, how much money in your mind are you thinking can be brought back to the country?
How much money
is outside needs to be brought back to the country?
Yes, I'll start with that and I'll come to what you're talking about, manufacturing, regulations and all that, because that's an important area. In the budget of 2017-2018, Henry Rotich, as he then was, the cabinet secretary, said to us that 14.6, which was rounded up to 15 trillion, was stashed abroad and needed to be brought back. To date, that money has never been brought back. We've never had a report. Later, in the year 2020, the late Honorable Joseph Nyaga called again, and his was a cry, please, let's bring our money back. We develop this country. If that was about 15 trillion, and since then 5 years have gone by, we use 2 billion per day. That's about 730 billion. Give it 1 trillion round up. That's about another 5 billion. 5 billion. When in my consideration, we have not less than 20 trillion outside the country that can be brought back. And if it is brought back, this country will be turned upside down and turned into a country that we can't tell that it is the same country.
On that
and
point,
that's just one area.
On that point, Mr. Wahiga, during the deputy presidential debate, your deputy presidential running mate, Ruth, said that you have already written to the United Nations and 15 other countries to start getting this money back into Kenya, and the hope is that if you assume office, the money will be back in Kenya. Have you had any response from these countries?
No, I have not heard, and I appreciate that we are in the period of elections, but I'm glad to know that things we've done, for us, our 100 days already started, if you wish, by that effort, and also calling for the Unga subsidy, which was effected. But they are listening. We've got goodwill from out there. We've got great friends from out of Kenya. And I know they too have been saying they wish Kenya can have a president who is speaking the things I'm speaking. I've not heard from them, but I know they are looking at goodwill. You know, I can mention a couple of other things. During the Jubilee period, we have signed instruments with the Swiss government. The Prime Minister was sometime back here in Kenya with Theresa May, when she was the Prime Minister, about repatriating our funds which are out there.
All right, but you are also on record having said that if these countries do not work with you and your government, you will cut off diplomatic ties. How practical is that?
Well, why isn't it? Why can't it be done? If a country is holding our money, it knows that it is supposed to be Eurobond money, or it is money from SGR, and it's aware. What else are we talking about? International cooperation, international friendship? How can you refer to a person, and here I mean a nation, as your friend? But what I know is that a lot of countries have been willing to send back our money. It's only that there have been no goodwill with the current leadership, the immediate past, and the leadership that wishes to be recycled.
But if they do not, will you cut off diplomatic ties?
Everything is on the table. Kenya needs to move forward. There has to be hard measures. But I can tell you, it won't need to get there. There's goodwill out there. There has been a cry. It's the other nations that they have even got a lot of dossier than I have of what has been done in this nation. And this has nothing to do with somebody who has worked hard and earned. It's Kenyan money, some of it which has been given to us from out there, and yet we have not used it carefully. But you also referred me to,
yes.
Is it about manufacturing, regulations?
We will get back to that, but this is important. Are you telling our traditional partners and allies that everything is on the table, including cutting ties?
Yes, that's what David Waure-Wajakhoya is saying.
Do you not think that would have a massive negative impact on our country, our economy, our development?
Imagine you are a nation called Simiriti and you are holding 10 trillion that is supposed to be Kenyan money. You know it. What then can we talk about? Rights, human rights? What more human rights? We are not in a state of war as a nation. Surpasses you are saying, look here, Kenya. There are these individuals, 1, 2, 3, 4, who are holding your money. We have traced it using the various instruments, using the various secret agents and other and we know it is part of this. I mean, like for instance, and it must be common knowledge, there are nations right now that have come with laws. If you take money out there and you are not able to tell who it is appropriated that nation, by that nation, and used for development. Kenyan wealth is being used to develop other nations. It is immoral. It is wrong. You are not a friend of Kenya if you are using Kenyan money to develop your nation. Kenyans are suffering now. They need their money back. Bring our money back is our campaign.
Whichever country it is, including the US, the United Kingdom, you're telling them tonight, you'll go for them.
Oh yes, yes. Yes, everybody. You are holding our money. The nations you have mentioned have brought democracy to us. They have done a lot of good things to us. But you know what? I am telling you, 99% of them have wanted to. What we have missed in this nation is a leadership, is goodwill. Is a leadership says, let's do it. This country will not be the same 5 years down the line. This nation will be a nation where you will want to invest in. This nation has that potential. It's our time. It's our season. That's what I'm saying. I am actually passing a message to them.
Take us back to the economy now. Manufacturing, regulations, and trade. Take us back there.
Yes. You asked me, could those also be problems? We have to change also in a number of things in the way we do business. Granted, one could argue and say 65, maybe 70 of our regulations are good, but we can improve on them. Corruption has been a big problem. Bureaucracy has been the other problem. Very high taxation, particularly the corporate tax, has been a problem in Kenya. We've got to think twice. Yes, of course, I mentioned the key one has been corruption. I was there and I was grown up. I was working in the year 2002 when we got in the Kibaki regime. And I am aware, and I got it from people who knew, how nations come to Kenya. Because within the first 4 months, there was such active effort to get corruption out of our streets and what we were doing. And they wanted to invest. I actually came to learn they were being told, no, we've had enough. We don't need you. We can't do that. But I've also heard of instances, and I'm speaking to somebody who is listening here in Kenya or out there. They have to come to Kenya, applied for tenders, won tenders on all fours, and then when they went to get their tender acceptance letter, they were told, before you get this tender, you have one more step to step. You need to pass. You need to go and see Mr. XY said. Apparently, the information I have is that some of the people who needed to be seen, if the four of us were here, are my competitors. Though you have passed all the steps for the tender, it cannot be approved until a final step, which is not in the official list, is approved. These are facts that are known, and people have said, how can we do this? You told us that it's above board. People know of offices in this country where people went to pay 10%, 20% after they had passed all the tenders. And some of those men and women are going to line up here in coming days, maybe after this or in other platforms, and say we'll fight corruption. Our problem has been corruption, almost in our veins. But I know Kenyans are not corrupt. Kenyans don't like corruption. We showed it in the year 2000. So we need to improve on that. We have had problems with power, infrastructure, both energy and the infrastructure on the ground. Those are the issues that we need to discuss and we need to look into. We have had Kenyans who've gone out there or gained a lot of knowledge to come to Kenya, and they have wanted to set up industries, manufacturing entities, to get things going. But bureaucracy, corruption, red tape has been our undoing.
Is this the reason why you are advocating for making public all the contracts, starting with SGR, the expressway, the Lamu port? Naivasha dry port, Kisumu port? Is this the reason, part of the reason why?
Part of the reason, but the other reason, Ken, is that there is no way we can fight future corruption unless we do with the current and the past. We must have a discussion amongst Kenyans. And I know what you are referring to. You are referring to the fact that we have said we'll also establish a Truth and Recovery Commission. We must have a conversation and ask, why have we been this corrupt? Why have we allowed this much corruption? It's got to start there. For South Africa, it had to start there. Truth. The Truth Commission that was set up, it was a starting point and it was key. We must discuss and talk about that. But that's not all that we'll be doing in that. Actually, that will be part of it. We must still ask how much money went into the SGR. We need to know how much, who are the KEMSA billionaires, and why have their names not been read out, and the money that they took away brought back into the country. This, the Honorable Deputy President of this Republic knows who they are. This, the former Prime Minister knows what they are. This, Professor Wajakhoya knows who they are, being a person in the intelligentsia. And yet, they are not ready or willing to tell it. How can they fight corruption? How can they lead? How can you also lead when you are not ready to come on a podium like this and tell Kenyans what you want to do for them?
As we end the topic on economy, you mentioned earlier 15 trillion shillings that is stashed outside. You mentioned earlier 15 trillion shillings that is stashed outside.
Yes.
However, this could be the whole amount of money from Kenya that is outside, because the Brookings Institution says that about $12.5 billion. That's the only money that perhaps is illicit trade or illicit flow from Kenya to the other countries that is stashed outside. Why would you be going for even the investments that have been made by Kenyans outside and not specifically this illicit financial money that has been flowing to other countries? Why would you go for everything?
No, we go for everything, Ken. For me, that was read by the Minister of the 14.6, 15 trillion. It was the Minister for Finance. It was the Treasury Cabinet Secretary who said that. He had the facts, he had the intelligence, he must have spoken with State House and they knew about it. His speech, some executive summary had been sent round, so it was known. He had contacted foreign governments and known there is probably as much as that. So I find no reason why. I've seen other records that talk about 6 trillion, but you know, we've never had evidence that has been brought back. But let's even come back to Kenya. You and I have not even discussed the 2 billion. The 2 billion, which adds to 730 billion per year. I'll round it up to, call it 1 trillion. That's what we lose per year. So if that is what we have lost per year, these last 5 years, that is 5 trillion. During the last 5 years, if everything worked that way, that was another 5 trillion, if my maths work right. What we are saying, even with the 2 billion, we could have paid the 8.2 trillion Kenya shillings. We could have done that from the 2 billion without going for anything out there, and yet we still need to go out there. I mean, this matter of corruption, siphoning public money, and what we've been doing has been our undoing. No country can develop with corruption. And with the level of corruption that we have had in this nation, no wonder we are still begging and our people are going hungry. I've just given the 2 billion. And for us, within Agano Party, and with our experts, the 2 billion for us, we say is not even, can't even be a correct figure.
The 2 billion, Mr. Waure, the 2 billion from the Institute of Economic Affairs is not necessarily lost. It's been the uses. So if education was allocated 600 billion, perhaps they took a portion of it to another use, not necessarily lost. So when you do that sum totality, could you just be misleading us? Because this money was allocated to something and probably just diverted to another use and not the intended purpose. That's why we lack classrooms, for example.
The president of our nation did not lie. He said 2 billion is lost. 2 billion. 2
Do you
billion
believe
does
the president
not,
now?
2 billion does not get into the economy. And later he was heard to say in matters corruption, I mean, he had tried his best. The word he used was his hands were tied.
But the
That
Institute
figure
of Economic Affairs says this money is not necessarily lost. It goes to other purposes.
I mean, but why can't we see the effect? Why do we have such high cost of living? Why have Kenyans been going hungry? What are these other things? What has the Institute said? For me, I would say it's gone into people's pockets. For me, I would say part of that money would be on its way to some countries. I mean, the whole area of our financial fidelity, our being the shepherd I referred to, our doing what our brothers did. You see, from the word go, Singapore took such a firm and a stern position, the President Lee Kuan-yew, concerning matters corruption. And I submit to us that that nation would not have been where it is if he had done so. No nation can develop with corruption. Rwanda has come up just lately, and look at what our brother is doing.
All right.
Over there. I mean, phenomenal similarity. I need to emphasize that.
Okay.
Just recently, it's not even 1963. Give Rwanda another 5 years. Botswana, they also fought corruption.
All right,
you cannot move forward with corruption.
Let's just come back to here. And you spoke about Kenya needing to be self-sufficient. We need to be a food-secure nation. There is a very close link between food security and climate change. We are seeing droughts. Millions of people are starving in our country, yet your manifesto speaks very little to climate change. What mitigation and adaptation measures is your government going to put in place to cushion Kenyans against climate shocks?
Climate change, the whole issue of the changing patterns of the weather is of concern to me and my team. Right now we are experiencing weather we have not had before. We have stopped talking of today was very hot or today was very cold, the way we defined it. We are now even going into what were the centigrades per day. You've noticed in our manifesto we've talked not just about measures we do, but even the fact that we would introduce taxation. We've noticed that. The first one is a poll tax for people who interfere with things that go into ensuring that we are not influencing the climatic changes that we are seeing, we have in Kenya, we are seeing in other nations. But it is very important in Kenya we have a discussion round about this matter before we become industrialized, because we are going to be industrialized. We have seen what the gases from the industries have done to other nations. And we don't have to wait to get there for us to deal with that situation.
So how are you going to deal with it?
The things I have in mind is, it
a
is
reminder
time.
to our audience, please, as per the debate rules, no cheering, jeering, or noise. Do continue.
Yes, sorry, come again. What was that?
My question is
how? Let me give
how
you...
are you going to ensure Kenyans remain food secure vis-a-vis climate change? What measures does your
must
government
bring
have
education,
to put
that's
in
number
place?
one. We must tell Kenyans that our rivers are important, our forests are important, our mountains are important. We must come back and enforce. We have laws that have to do with things that affect climate. But right now, you know, we have cut down about half the trees in Kenya. We must find ways of preserving our water. Kenya is very watered, but all the water goes to the ocean. We must come back even to a city like Nairobi and ask, why did we allow this building to be built next to a river? We must go to sources of water. Sources of water have been grabbed, and next to them, as much as developers can get, built houses. We must get to a point where we say, if something was done irregularly, it needs to be pulled down.
Mr. Wahiga, does the Agano Party have a plan to make Kenyans more resilient in the wake of climate change and ensuring food security and therefore bringing down the cost of living? Do you have a plan?
We do have a plan.
What is that
because
plan?
Agriculture is very important to us. And if you'd have noticed, we've said that the office of the president will keep a very close eye to agriculture. Because without food security, we are going nowhere. We can't be begging those many years after we became independent and we started ruling ourselves. We have talked about the preservation of our rivers. We've talked about injecting money. We've talked about bringing subsidies that enable farmers to produce fertilizer. We've talked about that. We've talked about exploring markets. We've talked about getting Kenya to where it was in terms of agriculture. You know what? We are not short of studies. We are not short of, as a nation, of projects that have come into being. Galara would have been, it's a case study. It's a case study. The nation of Israel, and I can't purport to be their spokesperson, were disappointed, and very many nations have been disappointed. That was something, but look at what we did with it. It's amongst the scandals that we have in the Jubilee government. This is what I'm saying, we are not going to allow anymore. So we must, it is one of the two areas that my office as the president, if Kenyans are pleased to vote me, that one, agriculture, and the whole area of asset recovery, I've said it's something every day I'll keep an eye on. I would want a report on it. I would want to know what is happening. So we do have that. We recognize people are still going hungry. We want to recover our riparian lands. We want to bring education from the lowest grade on all these matters. We want to bring sensitization. And Kenyans are all very open-minded. They are tired. They want a change. They want to move forward.
Okay, and just before we move on to the next topic, let me just circle back to my first question under this topic of the economy. I asked how you intend to bring down the cost of living within the first 100 days, but I also asked by how much? What can Kenyans expect from you? How much do you intend to bring down the cost of living?
I think that the most I can talk of is by what I will do. It's by what I will do.
So you don't have an answer to that?
It's what I will do. I believe as a nation now that even our annual budget should not be 3 trillion. If we did things right, if we preserved our public funds, if we put them to the use they should, our annual budget should be going up to 10, 20 trillions instead of 3 trillion. If we had done things right, we should not be, and we are not unthankful, we are thankful, just rejoicing that we have got 22 kilometers expressway. This nation will be full of expressway, hundreds of miles. So I am really talking of, if I can give an estimate from here, I can't remember what we have said, bringing the cost of living. I tell you what, even if out of my 20, 30 trillion Kenya shillings, which I believe is both out there and wasted, we got 10 trillion. This nation will be flipped upside down. I read something this week in one of the dailies. It was in the Nation newspaper. Let me give credit to, and I will report. And they said that the current road network, which we understand infrastructure, 11,000 kilometers, that's what we built. We built it with 1.5 trillion. Look at what 1.5 trillion can do. What if you have 10? What if you have 15? What you have 20? Kenyans, I'm asking you to take a journey with me. Visualize, close your eye, and see a nation 59 years, what it should have been. The other nations we talk about, as I look at you, New York, London, Singapore would be looking up to Kenya. Okay. That's what I want to make Kenya to be.
Okay, and we can't end this topic before we talk about employment. It's a huge issue in the country right now, and a number of Kenyans are not employed, particularly those leaving school who are looking for jobs, and even the adult population, some of them even above 40 years are not employed. And it says statistics also show that about 63% of Kenyans tonight will go to bed without a meal on the table. What is your plan for this group of people if you are elected president to create employment to this country? We've had promises of 1 million jobs a year, 800,000 jobs. What is the Agano plan for this?
Might I interject and ask also, how will you create more jobs in the formal sector?
Yes.
We have looked at that issue. It's close to our hearts. I feel you, I feel Kenyans, because things are bad out there. Things are real bad. We have said in our manifesto that we will endeavor to create employment at all levels. With the 2010 Constitution, we went devolvement. And one of the things we have said in our manifesto that when we bring our funds back, when we stop the siphoning, the 2 billion, when we arrest those people who have made it impossible for the government or the president to move forward, we will give from the national office 40% to the devolved units. And we have said out of that, that is far above even but that's above the 35 that BBI was promising. That even beyond that, we want to ensure that 50 million at least goes to the lowest unit of development, which is the village council. And there are people who would say, how would that happen? And what benefit will it have? For us, we devolved money. Unfortunately, we also devolved corruption, but we never devolved decision making. We are interested, we want Kenyans to decide what they want to do from the lowest unit, the mtaa, the village, the nyumba kumi. And why is this important? Because some part of the job creation will come from there. It is there they will decide we need a road to this area, we need to make a cattle dip if there are areas without. Is there they will decide that we need to have this milk processing. And out there, there are so many youth. It is down at that level where they know their needs are. So that is one way that we'll be able to do that. Secondly, we will be injecting money. I think the picture I would like to bring out to all Kenyans and those listening is, I am not just proposing things we'll do, but I am saying in my government we will have money, and that the money is somewhere. If the money we are talking about comes, we have talked about how we should be able even to give to the youth, to give to the workers, not less than 500 billion Kenya shillings. Because assume that money comes back, or even half of it, or even a quarter of it. Look at the wonders it can do. We've also talked about skills as being important. People need skills. We've talked about giving money to young people so that they can do startups. We've talked about getting rid of certain taxations so that Kenyans can be able to move forward. So we've talked again at bringing back cottage industries, and there's a sense in which they are coming back. Because like when I was growing up in my home area, I was born and grew up in Nakuru County, and in a small town known as Turi. I remember when I was very young, and that's many years, in the early 70s, and there was this small place where they were building hooks, and they were exporting them. And I know the young people from the area. Okay. Then I was in primary school. I could see them proudly, because there was something in the neighborhood that they were doing. In my hometown also of Molo, we had things and concerns that were going on. We had, these last 20 years, we have had a potato industry. The last I heard about it, it hadn't started off. And I'm saying taking industries. So we have had what we are calling pesa mashinani, madaraka mashinani. Let decisions be made there. So we will inject money.
Okay.
We will inject goodwill.
A potential voter for you has a question for you. Let's take the question.
My name is James. All candidates. How will your government support institutions that promote police reforms and professionalism within the police service, so that we don't have cases of police brutality and the cases of extrajudicial killings?
Do I go ahead?
Yes.
We will be a government of the rule of law. And I need to say that among the other things that have brought us down is impunity. And impunity is disregard of the law. Impunity is a situation where those who are in power are not brought into book. They seem to be above the law. And it's not like we don't have institutions. We will strengthen judiciary. We will strengthen our investigative units. We will pay them well. We've talked about that. We have, in our manifesto, we have talked about 12 covenants, and one of them is covenants with men and women in uniform. We will give them modern machinery. We will get them we will give them freedom to make decisions, you know, in the sense there will be no interference. We will strengthen the offices and other agencies, EACC, that deal with anti-corruption, asset recovery. And in matters extrajudicial killing, we'll bring back the rule of law. It's because of impunity. You know, corruption comes with a lot of things. It comes with all those evils and ills. And we have seen a judiciary that's willing. We will give money into it so that it can have courts into every county, which has been one of its desires. I'm saying, when we are a nation with money, when we are mission, the sky is the limit to what we can do. But also when there is goodwill, which is what I'll be bringing from where I am, we should be able to stop all that extrajudicial killing, bring to book, indeed, even revisit those which have not been adjudged to date. And I'm grateful this week we saw the court just do something in the right direction, because we can't continue doing this. It's part of impunity, which my government will deal with.
All right. There's also a second question for you, Mr. Waure.
My name is Jacqueline Kagu. I'm a mental health advocate in Kenya. And I want both parties to explain what they have in store for mental health in this country, given that in mental health, Ministry of Health has allocated 0.3% to mental health, which is very little compared to what is in store for in matters mental health. And given that Mental Health Amendment Act 2022 is almost being signed by the president of this country.
Sorry, Ken, I missed a little bit of what she said.
Issues of mental health.
Mental health, yes.
Yes.
We can't ignore that mental health is here with us. It's with our brothers, it's with our sisters. It's with people very close to us. And that's why I think the suggestion, one of the reasons, the suggestion to introduce, to rigorize the growing of bang in our nation, that's why I'm opposed to that. And I know you'll be asking more about that question. Mental health is horrible. I personally have had people close to me who have suffered from that. And we need to start tackling that. We need to come up. We have said a lot about in our covenant, Agano na Kenya kuhusu afya, concerning health. In our hospitals, this is something we will want to give a lot of attention to. Number one, we need to start tracing it from as early as primary school, if not high school, because one of the problems we've had is ignoring that mental health is real and it exists. Number two, we need to come up with what other countries have done. And other countries have come with means and ways and means, where there are even lines where you can call because you feel like taking your life the next 1 minute, and you get a counselor ready waiting for you. We need to come up with places that the government has oversight over. Right now, I'm not sure, I can't say 100% that the government has oversight over rehabilitation. I was checking the other day and it was not clear to me who licenses or how they should be licensed. I mean, and right now it's at very high level with the problems that we have to come. We will give enough money to our health sector. We've talked about at least a 5-level hospital in every county. And in it, we will demand that there be established a department of mental health.
How much is enough money?
You know what we've been saying? We have 12 covenants with Kenyans. And we are saying to them, you know what, before the end of our first year, we saw ourselves getting not less than 12 trillion back into this nation, more. And we have gone as much as saying, we are saying no to corruption, bring our money back, and we have even been had to say 1 trillion for every economic sector in Kenya. If we are not able to give 1 trillion, we are talking about half trillion. We have money in this nation. This is a wealthy nation.
Okay.
That's why we're able to lose 2 billion and we can't notice it. That's why 215 billion euro board is unaccounted for. It's nowhere. And nobody, the moment Auditor General Ouko left, and after a few months, it's a forgotten business. It's not forgotten. We want to know where the Eurobond money went to.
All right, at this point, I would like to shift focus to our next topic, and that is on the issue of education. If you assume office in the next few weeks, perhaps, your biggest headache in the education sector will be as early as January, when 2.5 million students will have to transition into secondary school. How are you going to address this crisis of congestion? Because already secondary schools are congested.
I know I will not be the first one to address it. I know there are studies, there are recommendations which have not been able to go into them. But first of all, we have talked about the fact that we introduce free education from Kenyans from the lowest unit to the highest unit. And remember, my government is different from the other. We are saying we will have the money because we are going for the money where it is.
Free education, basic education, is in the Constitution. It's enshrined.
Yes, but
primary
it's not
and secondary.
there.
Are you saying that you are also going to give university students free education?
We are talking also of university students. It's from the lowest to the highest. And that's something apparently I have found almost every.
How are you going to fund that if already our education
I am
sector
the
is in a
only
crisis?
candidate who has a solution to where we'll get money to find our economic. I am the only one. Look at my proposals. I'm the other one who is going for the juggler. And I'm not just that, I am saying we'll go even for the big fish. It doesn't matter who you are. If we have an abacha in this nation, we'll get money from that abacha. That's what we are saying. We are so serious on this matter. But to come back to your question, education is a problem at many levels. We've talked of free education. We've talked about consultation. Right now we have the CBC, and we know what a problem it is. And we will sit down with the stakeholders. We will consult. We will have to find ways, but I think we are going through the first period of the problem is the CBC. Like,
but I'm not,
they're overlapping.
My question is not about CBC. It is about the immediate problem that you're going to face, which is to find space for 2.5 million students in secondary school. You wouldn't have much time.
Because we have money, we will find a way out.
So we'll have money by January?
Build makeshift shelters, we'll have to do that. But I'll tell you what, I'll be taking a corrupt country, but I'll be coming in, both a corrupt and a broke country, but I'll be coming in with money. But I think there are no easy solutions, and I hear your concern. These are matters that we will have to see what we can do. And some of the possible solutions will be to look for ways, makeshift. We probably might have to go virtual in some form of education.
At the moment, you don't have a plan.
Not for that specific number, but we have a covenant with Kenyans on education. We will put money into it. We will discuss and improve the CBC, not doing away with it altogether. We have that. We have said we'll give free education. In terms of a specific like that, it may not, again, a manifesto can't contain everything. But we'll have to find ways. Everybody must go to school. If we have to do it virtually, we will have to go that way. If we have to turn some government offices, I don't know, I have not thought about it. Every Kenyan must go to school, must get a learning. It's a problem, I agree. But again, it's a problem we have inherited, and we have to find ways. As a president, I will not sit back. Okay. But with money, the sky will be the limit. You know what? Even classrooms, through fabricated materials. You can build a house, classrooms in a matter of weeks, if not days.
You understand?
There will be money in my government.
You understand, I want to ask you more about education, but you understand even getting that money to Kenya, the money that you're targeting, must be an issue of legislation, must be an issue of the law.
You know, it's at two levels, Ken. I'm talking, first of all, of our money out there, but I'm also talking of wastage from here.
Okay.
Kenyans showed us in the year 2002 that we can stop corruption. And there was goodwill. Unfortunately, we did not move on and build on that. And when we came back in the current government, we have even gone back to way before the coalition government.
Okay.
I mean, I know because of the steps we are taking, even by waiving away 50% of pay, Kenyans will sit back. Kenyans love their nation. Kenyans know they have a great nation and say, why are we doing this? It's not right.
Okay, let me take you
Government,
back.
an Agano government of Waure-Wajakhoya is seeking to improve our lives. He wants to make us a first world. What we are doing is not right. And not only that, we will defend whistleblowers. Kenyans will talk. Kenyans will talk, come to the truth, and the Recovery Commission and tell what is happening.
I'd like to take you back now to CBC because you mentioned it in your statement. Parents, most parents are crying out and saying it's not working, it's very expensive for them. Some teachers also, including the Teachers Union, NAT and Coupe, took a stand on CBC earlier on. The only institution that took charge is the government, the national government, through the Ministry of Education, and the president, the outgoing president, has mentioned this. From where you stand, my first question is, would you continue with CBC? Would you rethink CBC if you were elected president, and why?
I would rethink CBC in the sense with a view to improving it. I have met parents as well, and I have family members who've got children who are in primary school. And admittedly, CBC has been very costly. Not only that, it's been very involving. But I've met parents from across both ends of the coin, some who have said, there is something good. And I agree because I passed through a bit of CBC. I went to school when we had subjects known as hard work, technical subjects, subjects known as agriculture, where we carried the hoe into school. And by the time I was grown up, there are things I could do for myself because I've been exposed to them. We will sit down with stakeholders and seek to improve it. It can be good for the future, but right now it's expensive, it's demanding. Kenyans don't have money. We can't continue like this. But again, we have said, this is one sector. Education is key. Kenya is where it is because Kenya values education. Kenyans are educated. We can't go back on this. Right now, we are into ICT, and we would like Kenya to be the country that's leading in those areas like other countries.
Okay.
So I have answered your question. We will think with a view to improving.
One of the biggest voting bloc that perhaps you're looking at as a presidential candidate is the teachers of this country. And the teachers of this country have had a very bad run, according to them, with the government, the outgoing government. And they're wondering today, would you guarantee their interests if you were elected president? And would you put NAT back, for example, to where it was probably 10 years ago?
Oh yeah. We have spoken about education. We've talked about increasing salaries to the men and women in uniform. We've talked about the welfare of the men and women in healthcare. I mean, part of the money that should have gone to meet the needs of these people, and they are very critical. I would want Kenyans to be proud to be teachers, to be educators like in other nations. I feel proud when I go home and I meet Mr. Opondo, who is now going to almost 100 years. I haven't seen him in quite a while, who was my primary school teacher, and he is still there. He made me who I am. I feel very proud to walk around and meet policemen who are doing a good day's job, but they are not paid well. They are housing and so on. I am proud with the little security I've granted to meet young men who love their country, who are doing their job, who want to move forward. I'll take care of their welfare because I will have the money.
All right, we are almost out of time, but I want to bring a question to you about an issue related to health. If you assumed office in August and a few weeks later it was declared that monkeypox was in Kenya, monkeypox has been declared a global health emergency, what plans would you have in place to address this health crisis? And bear in mind, monkeypox would have come just a few days or weeks after you came into this office. Therefore, you wouldn't have had time to get that money from abroad that you keep referring to.
I think the first thing I would like to say with pleasure is that there will be no monkeypox billionaires in my government. And secondly, I'm waiting. If the president doesn't do it before, just like he did with UNGA, and I'm thankful, up to be the president who will announce, and not just announce who the KEMSA billionaires are, but get the money back from them. I appreciate it will not be easy, and it has been said it will not be easy. I will seek to work with everybody. I will seek to work with our friends in Kenya and outside, with the various agencies. We've got trained doctors. We have got we have Kenyans who listen and want to do what is right, so that I believe there are measures we'll be able to take that can prevent it escalating. But when it comes as an emergency, we have no choice. You have to get to the consolidated fund and elsewhere in the exchequer where we can get money and put it into that, because lives of Kenyans matter. We'll also be careful about who does what, who sources what drugs, who brings what drugs, because that's where we got the KEMSA billionaires. To date, none of my competitors, while they know, wish to tell us who they are.
So does your party have a plan to address a health crisis?
We have talked about increasing our hospitals. We've talked about taking care of the welfare of the doctors and the health workers. We've talked about, actually we have talked about something very unique. Just like we have a teachers' commission, we have talked about bringing back something that the health workers have been asking for, a health commission, which nobody has wanted to. Because it's important. We can't succeed on this war without involving them. They are the machinani of the health.
Before we
so
close,
do we have that?
Let me ask again, does your party have a plan to avert a health crisis?
We will just have to work with what we have.
So
we will call upon friends. I mean, I am not in government. I'm not like the Deputy President or the Right Honorable, who are both in government in one form or another. I mean, we'll just have to work with what we are. We will call upon friends, our neighbors. We will call upon all doctors. It will be a crisis. And we will ask Kenyans, this is where we are. We'll be transparent. And the international community we've seen it come to the aid of various nations. Kenya is a friend of many nations. Okay. We will get help. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Mr. David Wahiga Waure, thank you so much for coming to the debate tonight.
Thank you.
You have now 2 minutes to make your closing remarks.
Kenyans, you have heard me. I am told a number of you have already decided on who to vote for. But the question I want to ask, have those that you want to vote for made a difference in your life? I have told you the reasons why we are where we are. And yet those others, or my competitors, some who don't even want to come here and give you a minute of their time to tell you what they are talking about, to allow themselves to be interrogated, are saying they'll make a difference. Can they make that difference? I am saying to you, and don't you feel with me, that we are here because we have recycled leaders, and we are at a point where to move forward, we need to break some glass ceiling. I am telling you, I'm the real deal. There comes a time when hard decisions have to be made. Yes, I'm not part of them, and I've not been part of them. I'll come like the biblical David, of whom, as I said earlier, it's written, he shepherded Israel, by the integrity of his heart and the skillfulness of his hands. I want to be that leader. I'm the real deal. Mimi ndiye nitabadilisha Kenya kabisa. Naomba kura zenyu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wahiga. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience and our viewers following this at home, we have to end it here for now. Our appreciation to Mr. David Wahiga of the Agano Party for honoring voters with this duty to a public televised national debate. Well, it was an interview. We thank you again.
And of course, it's not the end. The second presidential debate kicks off at 8 p.m. live from this same platform with my colleagues Yvonne Okwara of Citizen TV and Eric Latif of Spice FM and KTN News. We thank you for watching. My name is Ken Mijungu of KTN News.
And I am Smriti Vidyarthi of NTV. Good night.
All right, so the 90 minutes are done. David Wahiga Waure making his case in front of the Kenyan people. Of course, his opponent, Professor Waure-Wajakhoya, who was expected to take that podium, the empty podium that you saw there, did not come for the debate. He sort of came and left. But here we are. We have listened to the Agano Party presidential candidate for the last 1.5 hours. And here with me, I still have my panel here. None of them has walked out. I need to emphasize because it looks like we've had a dramatic evening here. Dennis Kabara is still with us here, Professor Alex Awiti, Sheila Masinde, Wanjiro Gikonyo, and of course Houghton Irungu. Houghton, I'm a bit scared to give you the platform because the moment you start speaking, someone will arrive. But let's see. Let's see. Maybe that's a good thing, huh? So
give me two chances.
We'll give you two chances, and we'll be set for the evening. But I wonder what you picked out from Waure's 90-minute in the limelight, as it were.
So I picked up two issues. I think the first issue I picked up was really this idea of a redemptive leadership, a leadership that is grounded in faith, not necessarily Christian faith, but values and ethical values at that. And that was something that was really important. I think, I was struck a little bit by the parallels between him and Lazarus Chakwera of Malawi,
yes,
who was elected after 24 years of being an Assemblies of God
Minister,
preacher.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that I got. And I think we have to recognize that religion is an extremely vibrant, thought-provoking force in the continent. And they're saying something like two out of every 5 Christians in the next 20 years will be in Africa, right? So we should expect more candidates to come forward to put themselves forward for leadership. Fact check.
All right, I told you, but it's not a candidate. It is the Agano Party presidential candidate is out there, and we just want to hear how he thought this went for him.
You're not lucky.
Thank you very much, Joe. He is outside here, just emerging from the debate. Your opponent, the man you were meant to engage on the podium, the Roots Party presidential candidate, Professor Waure-Wajakhoya, failed or rather declined to take part in this debate. What do you make of that?
Well, I was very disappointed and doubly disappointed because I actually saw him driving, and I can't understand why he should come all the way here to say he will not participate. As leaders, we must allow ourselves to be interrogated. I feel a sense of freedom. I feel like I can fly because I have spoken to Kenyans. They have had an opportunity to ask me questions. It is important, Kenyans, you ask yourself, who can you depend on? Is every policy being proposed a policy that can work? Why don't we interrogate it in a place like this? I'm disappointed.
Do you feel you managed to achieve what you set out to achieve here this evening?
Yes, and I was surprised how time moved very quickly. And I feel elated because I was being honest. But also, it is important that leaders come out and they come out as they are before Kenyans. And they say why they are in this race. Let's stop giving promises out there. But let's also, when we come here, explain the past, what we do in the future, and what we have done in the past. And if you've been in government, why we are where we are. And for instance, some of the examples I gave explain where is the 215 billion euro board if you are in government when that money went missing.
All right, thank you so much. Well, Joe, the Agano Party presidential candidate just leaving. He says he is the real deal, very confident that this evening he got to clarify, he got to articulate the policies that he has for Kenyans if he wins the elections come August the 9th. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Rita Tinina. Just engaging the Agano presidential candidate moments after he left that stage in his own assessment. Actually, the real deal, those two words were his on that stage, and he believes that he has done a great job. And Houghton, you were actually doing an assessment on this end, and I do hope that this time around you can actually finish your thoughts.
Let's keep going. Maybe the candidate will rock up as a result. So I think the first point, he talked a lot about religious leaders having been an important part of the second liberation struggle, the first liberation struggle, and so on. He talked a bit about Bishop Okulu and Muge and others. I think there are a number, and they're not just Christian. I mean, I think we have to think about Sheikh Balala. We have to think about the Chief Justice Emeritus Willie Mutunga, a Muslim. We have to think about younger generation of people who are very grounded in their faith but come to give leadership. So I think that was interesting for me. The second point that I wanted to raise was the question that was raised about mental health, because I think I heard something interesting there that I think all the candidates could address themselves to. The first one is this. We know from the stats that something like 300 people are diagnosed with depression every day in Kenya. And we are the fifth or sixth highest number of people who have mental health issues. Now, we've seen a new mental health bill come to pass. It was enacted just recently. This is the Senator Kasanga bill.
Yeah.
We've also seen a lot of investment in mental health institutions, and I think now you can use your NHIF card for mental health treatment. But the question we have not discussed yet is the issue of disabilities, other disabilities. So, for example, people with disabilities, I'm told, are something like about 8% of the voter base in this country. So that's a population of about 1.7 million people. I've not heard a strong argument for what candidates would do with regards to the issue of people with disabilities. What we've seen is really a gerrymandering or a fixing of the nominations that should be going to people with disabilities. And did we not see something like 79 party lists rejected just recently because people were using spaces for minorities and exclude marginalized communities for others? And I think we need to see more focus on all of the disabilities in the electoral race in the last few weeks of the elections.
Thank you. And Professor Witi, Houghton talks about this contrast that Wahiga Maure was trying to draw between himself and the other three gentlemen who are running for president in the country. And he basically says that he is the real deal because all these other guys have been there, done that, and there's a sense in which every one of them, according to him at least, can be associated with the problems that we have. Do you think that that was a convincing case that he was making, and did he succeed at it?
I think he made a good point, which Irungu already referred to, and I characterize it as a pastoral approach, that he is a good shepherd. And that is deeply inherent in his faith tradition. And you could see in his presentation, he talked a lot about corruption, the debt, the cost of living, integrity, values. So he was spot on the real issues that we should actually focus on. What begs in my mind is whether the voters out there are listening to the contrast that he's trying to draw. Because I think he speaks from the heart. And I think the question that he was asked about his public service record was a really awkward question. Because again, the question is public service just working in government? Or is public service basically serving this country in all other places like private sector, private endeavors, like being a businessman or something like that. But he draws a very sharp contrast. Now the question he asks, which is pertinent, is all the other gentlemen coming to this stage have a public service record working in government, from Waure-Wajakhoya to Raila Odinga to William Ruto. I think the challenge that he's putting before them is, why are we here? Right. What difference are you going to make? You've been you've participated in government that has basically brought us to this mess. The debt crisis, runaway corruption, a country that is devoid of integrity and a sense of values. I think he raises the right questions. And today we might actually say that he's not actually the fifth, he's the real deal.
Dennis.
I think, actually, to add on to what he's saying, my sense is sincere. He came across very sincere. His manifesto, of course, talks about restitution, and he talked a lot about that. My overall sense, it's a bit like the Constitution. It's ahead of its time. He's ahead of his time. If you see what I mean? He talks about things that
I'm
our
curious
politics
about that.
is not...
What do you mean he's ahead of time? Where is he and where are we?
The things he stands for are ahead of where we are. Let me put it that way. The values that Alex was referring to, that Irungu was referring to, it's not where we are.
But I mean, that is interesting, because I've heard people say that what we've had in this country is national decline, that we have this regression that has happened in this country, that if you talk to anybody, whether it is about public transport, whether it is health systems and all that, there are people who actually said things used to be better. So I'm wondering whether we have regressed, as people say, or we are yet to get to that place where he is, because I find that a very interesting...
My sense is, before the others, I think my sense is we have allowed standards to drop. Yeah. We have accepted falling standards. And he's basically saying this is the standard we should be at.
Wow. Sheila.
I like that this, do I call it an interview or a debate by himself?
Yeah.
That it started on the topic around values, ethics, morals. Because that's
music to our ears.
Oh, music to my ears. Yes, because it's something that we have really talked about for some time since we passed the Constitution. What are the ethical and moral standards that need to be applied for those who are serving in public office? And because when you look at the picture now, when you look at the ballot papers right now, a lot of those names are people who are not fit to hold office because they've been accused of one offense or another.
That's an interesting distinction, because you're talking about a different standard. Right now, in this country, the standard that we know, which we apply all the time, and every politician in town knows about it, innocent until proven guilty, and now they added something until you have exhausted all your appeal mechanisms. So what you are talking about is a different standard, and that is an interesting one.
Yeah, we have applied a criminal standard to Chapter 6, which requires a moral and ethical standard if we're going to actually live and breathe life.
But how do we get there? If the Constitution is not going to give it to us, if legislation is not going to give it to us, how do we get?
The Constitution has already given it to us. The Constitution, and that's a supreme.
But on paper, but we don't live it. That's what I am saying. How do we get to a point where we actually live Chapter 6?
I think, for now, in the next 2 weeks, because this is what we are looking forward to, August 9th, is about Kenyans applying those standards as they make decisions. As Waure spoke, that is what struck my mind, because we need people who are bringing respect and honor to public office. When you get into public office, it is not your personal property. It is public service is bequeathed to you by citizens, and it therefore requires that you take care of it, you nurture it in a certain way. But we have seen individuals who have abused it, and are coming back to us. You have come, it's like you've given someone your car, they've gone, had accidents, banged it, dented, and then they bring it back to you and tell you, you gave me your Mercedes Benz, now I want your, what's a
house.
Ferrari.
Take the house.
No. Now I want your 100 billion shilling house, and yet I gave you something
of smaller value and you dented it. So that's exactly what these people are doing. They're coming back to us, having tarnished, those public offices and asking for even more. And as I listen,
in the Bible, there's something about being faithful in small things, then you can be entrusted.
Exactly, but that's not what's happening in this country. and for me, if we want to build this country on a strong foundation, not on sand, but on rocks, that is what we need to do. And then we can then be able to relieve all these plans, that they have. If it's about gender representation, it's about the economy, it's about food security. That can't happen without talking about values, integrity, morals, and so on. But let me just talk about some of his comments that he made on issues around corruption, because he kept on coming back to it, the cost of corruption, and so on. I saw him talk about a lot of figures. I would have wanted to hear more about the qualitative cost of corruption. But then the other one is, I would have wanted him to just address some of the issues that he has raised and has proposed in his manifesto. For instance, and here he talked about strengthening institutions, particularly, governance institutions. In his manifesto, he talks about, for instance, strengthening the Asset Recovery Agency, because his manifesto is founded a lot on returning stolen assets, and he's talked about it. But then he talks about putting the Asset Recovery Agency under the presidency. And for me, I have questions around that.
That's
I would have wanted him to speak a little bit about that, because for me, that's not strengthening institutions. We've seen what has happened when the presidency has gotten involved in governance, certain governance processes.
How do you square that with this idea that you need something to be led, that you need leadership that is provided at the very top to get certain things to move? Maybe it's coming from that, because from around this table I can hear comments everywhere about the place of strong leadership, value-based leadership that is going to drive this anti-corruption war.
Yeah, but that's why we have independent institutions. And the reason why we have independent institutions is so that they're able to run without political or executive influence or manipulation, because we've seen that happen. And that is why, for instance, we will fault some of them for not performing to what is expected, because there's been a bit of interference, even in terms of how some of those individuals are selected and appointed. But here we actually need to let this institution patent, and how you ensure that is by ensuring that you're not meddling, because right now we have what we call political appointees in some of these institutions. And that's why I got worried when I hear that he wants to put some institutions under the presidency so that he can be able to drive the fight against corruption. I think the fight against corruption is best done under independent institutions. We have the Constitution, the legislative and policy frameworks that guide how they should work, and we should let that be.
And I'll revisit that, but I would like to hear what Wanjiru would say about David Wahiga Maure's 90 minutes out there.
Well, I think there's a role for the smaller parties, the fringe parties, and this is something we discussed.
Well, they don't like being called that, but I give it to you.
Right. I'm not sure what the politically correct term is.
I'm sure Wajakhoya wouldn't want to hear. Professor Wajakhoya is very...
Yeah. And part of their role is agenda setting, and it's to highlight and bring out with a lot of emphasis important issues that the larger parties have ignored. And I think in the case of Agano, they're looking at, it's an anti-corruption, governance, good leadership agenda. And I think this is the key, this is the main thing that's bedeviling Kenyans. Because we've got good plans. We've got countries that come and borrow our plans, go and implement them a lot more successfully. We've got good policy documents that don't get implemented. We've got very smart leaders. We've got a good constitution. So what's missing is the good governance, is in the leadership, integrity, accountability agenda. And I think as a Gano party, that is a very big contribution to the debate. Is it enough to, kind of push up the numbers and get a wide kind of appeal? It might not be, but if you look at what's happening, first of all, right now we are working under two coalition parties. So there's a role for parties that are issue-based. And as long as we are doing coalition building, as long as the party then is also serious in terms of not just showing up around elections but staying in between, there is a role for parties that are issues-led. And this, I think, is the central party, central issue bedeviling us.
It's interesting that you're saying this is the central issue, and it is being championed perhaps more than anyone else by a party that you call fringe, because it is a small party. It's not as big as the behemoths that the coalitions are. Isn't that an interesting paradox in a country that the things that we say are important here don't seem to be pushing the electorate in any one direction? As a matter of fact, there is no evidence as we speak now that corruption, for example, would make people not vote for someone.
Yeah, it is a paradox, but maybe we can look at the example of like the green movements, where you've had smaller parties, where you've had what was maybe a bit of a fringe issue, but a very important issue, now come to the center stage. So I really agree with what David is saying. Actually, I agree with all the panelists that it's very important to keep it on the agenda. It's an agenda we've been talking about and is kind of getting overtaken by the economic agenda. So it's important to Agano reminds us that economy is important, but you need to have the foundation. And possibly it's an issue whose time is not on the table, but until it is, we are going to remain in this kind of stop-start situation as a country where we don't quite achieve the economic potential that we can.
Dennis, you have done a lot of work in this economy governance space, whether it is Vision 2030, whether it is just sort of analyzing Big Four and all of these things. And there's a question that's troubling me here about the nexus between corruption and the economy, because it almost seems to some people that it is either or. And yet, what I'm hearing around this table is that they are inextricably intertwined, that you actually don't talk about the economy in any exhaustive way if you do not talk about the impact corruption is having in terms of impeding economic development.
Sure. You can't talk about the economy without talking about corruption. I think the arguments that are being made now, from what I'm seeing from the other parties, is that corruption does not have such an effect as it should. I think that's the wrong argument. I think this guy's argument is good because it goes back to basics. For me, corruption is the opposite of policy, if you see what I mean. So that every corrupt act is the negation of a policy act. Yeah? So if you're not doing the policy, which is the good thing, corruption is the bad thing. So you can't fix, and that's how you fix the economy. You fix the economy through policy. So for me, these things are completely related. They are related. I think the only point I'll make is, I don't know where his numbers are coming from. The 12 trillion, 15 trillion, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, even Houghton wanted to fact-check him, but let's hear.
He makes a good point. A lot of these manifestos that are being thrown at us are all visionary. But there's no one telling us about legacy. And by talking about these things of 12 trillion or 1 trillion or whatever outside, he's telling us fix the legacy thing.
But that's one number I want to hear from you. We've been told every day that because the president said there is some 2 billion that is lost every day. I don't know whether you share the view that is possible, whether that is... Because I've had certain parties, and he also referred to him quite a bit, to that question of 2 billion quite a bit, and it's almost as if all these parties are beginning to even make policy proposals with that as a key assumption.
I think that's exaggerated. I think 2 billion is probably the total of misaccounted and unaccounted for money. I don't think it's all theft. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think 700 billion is high. 700 billion, a third of the budget.
2 billion a day. 2 billion a day is how much annually? That's
it's 700 billion. That's a third of the budget.
Right, yes, but in terms of the minister...
But didn't the Auditor General talk about a third of the budget not being accounted?
The Minister of Finance has said that we lose in terms of tax expenditures, taxes, revenue unaccounted, between 600 billion to 700 billion a year.
It's now 300.
Pardon?
It's now 300.
This was in 20. It was in 2020.
You have recklessly mishandled, or does it mean that somebody has stolen it? I think
the president said stolen. The Auditor General, Edward Oko at the time, actually said a third of the entire budget is unaccounted.
They are unaccounted for, which does not mean stolen. You get?
But I mean, I know this for a fact. Sometimes I lose some notes. It doesn't mean that I've stolen them, right? But Joe, can I come back to just? I want to make quick points, right? One is this one, right?
Yeah.
It's not a paradox, right? This point about corruption is the single most important issue in this country, but yet we are not voting for candidates who are fighting corruption or are saying this is the key area of their focus.
Refusing to vote for people because they appear corrupt.
Exactly. My son had a very interesting point. He said, listen, the problems are only big because we're not big enough to deal with the problems. It is the lack of capacity and agency within this country to deal with issues of corruption that is the issue that we have to address while we think about what is actually happening with the money. And this 2 billion conversation is one of them. The second point is this one. There is only two differences between a leader and a criminal, right? If we can just simplify this conversation. The first one is a leader has a conscience, right? Put in the face of temptation, they will not steal, right? They have a conscience. It is internal. They don't have a conscience, then they have a fear of consequences. If you have a country in which there is people in positions of power who have no conscience and no fear of consequences, then you just have a chaotic country. And that's the point, I think, simplified.
But how do you get there?
You have to make corruption completely punitive. We have to criminalize it. We have to make sure that people are locked away. And secondly, that they're not put in positions. I mean, with a light touch with the Agano leader, I do hope that if Waure is not the 5th president, that he uses his connections to get in touch with St. Peter, so that at the heaven's gates, at the pearly gates, there will be a metal detector, there will be lifestyle audit documents, and there will be warrants of arrest for those people who have disgraced their office on this kingdom. I think that's just another opportunity for Waure.
You see why I was raising this thing. Look, you were talking about corruption, making it difficult, making it costly and punitive and all of these things. But we saw, like, I think it's Sheila who mentioned someone, the former MP for Sirisia. He was jailed. Now the case is going through some process and whatever, but the guy is on the ballot, and who knows, he might get elected. So how do we get to that point where people actually have it in themselves that if you stink of corruption, look like corruption, walk like it, I won't touch you until you sort out your issues? I mean, how does it become
question for me is
an electoral issue?
Transparency International have been doing, really, which is that the ethics, the Electoral Commission should not have allowed them to come before us.
Because
that is my simple
because response. When they go to the people, I mean, we've had in this country somebody says, "Come on, Nimwizi wetu." Yes, it's a thief maybe, but our thief. Just leave him or her alone.
Yeah, because Joe, as they're going back to the people, they're also going back with proceeds of crime and corruption. And that's how people are getting convinced and mobilized, to vote for this. And that's happening a lot, even in this election season. There's been a lot of exchange of money at the ground. You attend a rally, you're paid to disrupt someone's rally, you're paid to intimidate others. There's been a lot of cases of voter bribery. Where is this money coming from? Those are proceeds of corruption. And that's how these people continue to get a lifeline, because they continue to convince Kenyans with money that is stolen. But what we need to do, in addition, and I agree with Irungu, in terms of ensuring that we kill impunity, the only way is by punishment. But one of the other ways, other than using the law and enforcement and so on, there's a question we're not really looking at, is the whole question around culture change. Whatever we see, how Kenyans react, when you're given an option between heaven and hell, heaven being the good guys, hell being people who have been tainted, we go for the people who are tainted, meaning that you'd rather go to hell. That's how I see it. That means that we need to see some kind of
all right, Sheila, I have to stop you. This time it is Sheila. Yes. So there you have it. You the presidential candidate and Deputy President William Ruto arriving there, and Rashid Abdallah is on standby. Rashid, kazi kwako.
Bila shaka Joageo, ni kwamba ule muda ambao ulikuwa tunausubiri wa wale waniaji urais umefika kwa hivi sasa. Akiwa wa kwanza kufika ni mwaniaji urais kwa tiketi ya UDA chini ya mwamvuli wa Kenya Kwanza, ambaye si mwingine bali naibu rais William Samoei Ruto, ukipenda daktari, ambaye amefika katika muda huu angalau kuja kuzungumza na wananchi ili aweze kuweka ajenda zake paruanja, manifesto zake zieleweke katika mjadala katika siku hii ya leo. Kwa hiyo kwa hivi sasa tutakuwa tunamsubiri. Kumbuka ni mjadala wa pili, wa kwanza umeweza kukamilika ambapo David Waigamaure ameweza kueleza ajenda zake baada ya Profesa Waure-Wajakhoya kufika na baadaye kughairi kutoshiriki mjadala kwa sababu ambazo ziko nje ya uwezo wetu. Katika awamu hii ya pili itakuwa ni zamu ya naibu wa rais William Samoei Ruto akiingia katika mjadala na aliyekuwa waziri mkuu Raila Amolo Odinga. Lakini kwa hivi sasa Joageo, ni fursa ya kipekee kuweza kuzungumza naye, maana kumbuka ameweza kuandamana na watu wawili muhimu sana katika chama cha UDA wakati ule kule Kasarani, wakileta ajenda ya kwamba kama wanaafiki William Samoei Ruto kuwa mgombeaji wa urais kwa tiketi ya UDA. Yupo mama mboga mmoja aliweza kutoa swali hilo na mtu mmoja wa bodaboda akaweza kuidhinisha na kukubaliana hilo. Hivyo basi watu wao wawili ndio wale ambao wameandamana nao katika siku leo pamoja na mkewe na familia yake. Kwa hiyo utanipa nafasi kwa hivi sasa kwa dakika moja tuweze kuzungumza naibu wa rais ambaye amefika hapa. Shukrani sana naibu wa rais kuweza kufika katika siku hii ya leo. Hii ni siku ambayo ina umuhimu sana kwa kwako, manake umesitisha kampeni zako ukasema siku ya leo ni siku ya mjadala. Ina umuhimu gani kwako, kwa chama, kwa muungano na kwa taifa?
Leo ni siku ya muhimu kwa sababu tumekuja hapa tupate nafasi ya kuongea na Wakenya. Wakenya waweze kujua tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 wataamka mapema, waende wapige kura na wajue ni kwa nini wanapiga kura, ni upande gani watapiga kura na ni kwa sababu gani. Na ndio leo ni siku ya muhimu kwa sababu tutapata nafasi na wenzangu kujieleza, kueleza manifesto yetu, kueleza misimamo yetu kuhusu mambo ya muhimu yanayowahusu wa Kenya na taifa letu kwa ujumla. Tutazungumzia mambo ya uchumi hasa, tutazungumzia mambo ya vile tunaweza kuondoa njaa katika taifa letu la Kenya, vile tunaweza kupunguza gharama ya maisha, vile tutaweza kuzalisha nafasi za ajira za vijana wetu, vile tunaweza kuhakikisha kwamba wakulima wetu wanaweza kuendelea na majukumu yao, na mambo yale mengi muhimu ya matibabu, masomo ya watoto wetu, mambo ya afya. Haya ndio mambo ya muhimu, na naamini ya kwamba Wakenya wanangojea kujua ni yapi tulio nayo. Tumewazungumzia pale nyanjani, lakini leo tutapata nafasi mwafaka ya kueleza kinagaubaga yale mambo ambayo tumepanga kwa ajili ya uongozi wa taifa letu.
Labda pengine kwa utofauti naibu wa rais ni kwamba umeandamana na naibu mgombea mwenza wa chama, lakini hapa kuna watu wawili ambao walikuwa muhimu katika ule mkutano wa wajumbe wa chama cha UDA. Huyu mama ambaye aliweza kuleta swali na yule mtu wa bodaboda aweza kuidhinisha. Mbona ukawapa kipaumbele katika siku ya leo ya mjadala?
Kwa sababu nimeambatana na wao tangu tuanze hii safari. Huyu mama nilimpata kule Kiambu wakati tulienda kule kwa Economic Forum, na niliona ni mama mwenye ako na maono. Alitoa mchango wake kama vile wa mama wengi na Wakenya wengi wa tabaka mbalimbali. Karibu Wakenya 90,000 walihusika katika kutengeneza manifesto yetu ya Kenya Kwanza, na ni baadhi ya wananchi kama mama huyu na huyu mungwana ambaye pia ni mshirika wetu mkubwa katika chama cha UDA katika muungano wa Kenya Kwanza.
Pengine kwa kauli ambayo anaweza kuitumia kuweza kumalizia kwa yule hasla ambaye anatizama, anatarajia nini sasa hivi kutoka kwa kiongozi wake?
Anatarajia kujua ni vipi yeye ataweza kuweka chakula katika meza, ni vipi mtoto wake anaweza kupata ajira, ni vipi masomo yake ya watoto wake itashughulikiwa, ni vipi kilimo kitashughulikiwa na serikali inayokuja, na ni vipi anaweza kuhakikisha kwamba ako na matibabu, na ni mpango gani tulio nayo kumshughulikia ili aweze kupata matibabu bila matatizo. Naamini kwamba haya ni baadhi ya mambo Wakenya wanangojea.
Naam, kila laheri katika mjadala, kila laheri katika mjadala. Naam, naibu wa rais William Samoei Ruto, daktari, akisema kwamba katika siku ya leo ashazungumza mengi katika kampeni Joageo, lakini ana fursa ya kipekee kuweza kuyachanganua kwa utaratibu katika mjadala. Hivyo basi ameandamana watu wawili ambao ni muhimu sana katika safari yake yeye kuchaguliwa na kupewa tiketi ya uwaniaji wa rais. Narudi kwako ili Wakenya wapate fursa baadaye ya kujua mengi na wachanganuzi matarajio yao na hoja ambazo ni muhimu kujadiliwa katika siku hii ya leo Joageo.
Shukran. Rashid Abdallah there speaking to the Deputy President who is the UDA presidential candidate in the Kenya Kwanza coalition in this election that is now just 13 days away. Dr. Ruto there talking about what he believes is important for the country and sort of giving a glimpse of what he hopes to talk about during this. And interestingly, Professor Witi arriving with his entourage, which includes the two people we saw who endorsed him, Pauline Waithera and Kelvin Okoth, sort of trying to remind us of what he has been saying out there in campaigns.
Well, the DP is a master of optics, and I think this is just basically one of those instances where he uses to full effect essential imagery just to construct a narrative that endears him more to the ordinary Kenyans, because those two people are very unlikely participants at this level in this country. We don't see ordinary Kenyans flank presidential candidates. But I was just about to say one thing. The reason why ethics, integrity, and values are subordinate in our political discourse and in political organizing is because the basis for political mobilization is still ethnic. If you look at Raila Odinga, he gets onto this stage because he has a strong support of the Luo community. Look at William Ruto was built an interesting coalition between his Kalenjin community and the Kikuyus. Waure does not have that luxury. And therefore, when he rides on values, Kenyans are not paying attention, because what brings us to this stage to even then invite these conversations are not the important things. These things come afterwards. And this ethnic political mobilization is a huge problem that we have to deal with.
But Ruto has been saying this many times, that this election is about the economy and all of these things. And some people say that the ethnic question is not as pronounced in this election as it has been previously. Do you agree?
It is still a very strong undertone. It is the bastion that you got to start with. And when you see even your colleagues in the media basically trying to figure out how the electoral process is going to go, you always start with what you call the quote-unquote strongholds. In that entourage of Raila Odinga is Kalonzo Musyoka, okay, bringing in the big Kamba vote. In that entourage is the governor of Kakamega, bringing in the Luhya vote. And so you see this ethnic bifurcation being a very critical point of mobilization. So issues that are substantive to the citizens of this country, such as unemployment. How come we don't see youth mobilizing around the unemployment question? That even Waure today was just deplorable in the way that he handled it. He had no great ideas. And even Deputy President William Ruto and even Raila Odinga, nobody has any clue about how to mobilize the economic resources of this country to then create the traction that leads to jobs. We still imagine that if you're going to give us handouts in terms of grants and loans, that every young people can start a business. They don't want a business. They want jobs like you and I. They want jobs like the one that Ruto is seeking, not the jobs like their MPs. This economy of bringing your own job is not working. It never builds economies.
And that's a good place, Wanjiru, to kind of segue into this next debate that we are going to have in about 20 minutes' time, where we actually have two campaigns, markedly different in the platforms on which they are running. Both of them saying that it is the economy is stupid, as one American president said, but approaching this economy from very different directions. I wonder what you have heard and what contrasts or similarities you see in the overall platforms of the two main formations that we are about to receive. Hopefully we get both of them.
Right. So from my point of view, I think in terms of economy, there's been, and the manifestos, there's a win for Kenya.